Thanks very much, Des. Thanks so much for asking me. Just an absolute pleasure. Married to an Irishman, so it always feels good to come this way. I am a speech and language therapist. I've specialised in working with old people in 1992, and I was working in 2009 on a stroke unit late one night, avoiding an administrative task, and I read a paper that Don Berwick had just written. He called it Person-Centeredness and Confessions of an Extremist. And in it, he described why he was chilled to the bone about becoming a patient, what he called donning the invisible cloak of the hospital gown. And he feared losing power and losing control over decisions that he had a fundamental right to make. And these are some of the things that he highlighted in that paper. I read the paper, I was disturbed. I recognized that the concerns he had real validity in the institution in which I worked. So I rolled the paper up and I posted it to my chief exec. I sent a copy to my medical director and to the leads of the business units that I was working in, and asked the question, what are we doing about person-centeredness in our organization? And I tell that story for two reasons. One, because I think it signals the culture of the organization in which I was working. Something clearly told me that that was an acceptable thing to do, that in asking the question or raising a concern, I had sufficient trust in senior leaders that they would provide me with a response that I thought was worth taking the time to ask the question about. And so my culture, my organisation is like that. It's good to raise a concern. What Northumbria doesn't tolerate very well is people moaning on the sidelines about problems and not expecting that they have a part to play in making it better. So it ended up with me having further conversations with my chief exec around person-centeredness, and ended up with a new role in 2009 as Director of Patient Experience. It's a story of focus and a shift of the organisation and where we need to pay attention that we've learned. So I came back with that Turkey experience, and I had a very clear aim in my head to try and do two things. To improve care for patients and families in the hospitals in which I worked. We cover a large geography, so 11 hospitals spread over Northumberland. And also to support staff to provide the sort of care that they'd want to access themselves. Becky Mulby writes a brilliant paper around co-production and understanding the difference between voice, choice and co-production. So the story I'm about to tell now, in fact, isn't about co-production, it's about voice and using measurement and feedback to actually understand opportunities for improvement. That act of compassion in Turkey allowed me to use that knowledge to underpin the way that I wanted to measure. There are lots of definitions of what compassion is, but for me there are three components in it. The first is around paying attention, walking across your organizations in your services and truly noticing. Paying attention to what you see so that it inspires an emotion in your staff, namely empathy, and then acting on that with a desire to do something about the things that you've noticed. So our measurement approach allows us to do those three things. Pay attention, give that feedback to staff in a really timely way, within hours of speaking to patients, and then enabling them to feel in control of working in partnership to respond and take intelligent action. We speak to and gain the views of more than 50,000 people every year in a variety of ways. The views of that local population and communities deliberately informing the intention of our quality priorities every year as we go forward. And we talk about making toast with our data, ensuring it is robustly measured, fed back in a really timely way so that we can act in the moment on what people need a response to, making sure it's really clear and specific and actionable, and above all, making sure it's talked about at every level of our organisation. And I'll show you some good examples of that later. I'll be taking you through the way that we measure, but not everything that we measure counts, and not all of our systems for measurement are important. We've also worked with third sector organisations. Skills for Health, we're an organisation working with people with learning disabilities. People learning with disabilities able to visit our outpatient services and truly tell us how accessible our systems were, our information was. People talked about the fear of a dental appointment without actually knowing what was going to happen in advance of that, and the simple suggestion of use of photography that could make it clear about what would happen that contributed to a massive reduction in do not attends. We've worked with older people themselves, Age UK and Alzheimer's Society, to come and visit our wards, older people judging, sitting, observing our care in real time and giving us feedback about the opportunities we take to promote dignity and those that we miss. Particularly observing the care and communication around people with dementia and delirium who can't, because of communication barriers, contribute to our survey programme. And what it's allowed us to do is have a really granular understanding of the experience of care across our vast geography. And I can understand that information at a number of different levels. So at an organisational level, these are core domains of patient experience. So I went to my first exec management team meeting and I found the courage to say our measurement is not very person-centred. We're doing a lot of measuring, we're doing nothing with that information. We're certainly not going back to those that have kindly given their time to contribute, and we're not exciting our staff with it. And I was told by my chief operating officer at the time, that's fine, Annie, if you want to come back with your person-centred metrics by next week, we'll be delighted to listen to them. I stayed quiet for the remainder of the meeting, but in that week, Don Redding at PICA published a paper on the views of 72,000 people in hospital and the 7 things they cared about most. I had my metrics. I almost sprinted back to the exec meeting the next week. And we had a punt, we had a go. We started on only 8 wards and we measured twice a month on 8 wards. We started really small and we built that up over time. We now measure on every ward across our 11 hospitals twice a month. And every single one of those domains has improved over time. We've become kinder as an organisation, we've become cleaner, our care has become more coordinated, the relationships with doctors and nurses better, we've responded better to pain. We were ranked 111th in the country in national survey data when we started this work. The latest results have seen us beaten only by 10 single specialty hospitals. We're now 11th in the country, a jump of 100 places in between. The ownership of that improvement sits solely with patients and staff in my organisation. Mine is not a corporate team that pushes things down. It's a bottoms up, it's at the front line, and the responsibility for improvement lies with those people that are delivering care. The pride and joy and success equally theirs to own. At a site level, I could learn, so my organisation opened a brand new emergency care hospital. It's the first of its kind in the UK. We were able to listen and get feedback from the first 6,500 people. And they could highlight for us the things that had changed in less than a year by opening up and transforming that new clinical pathway. Our staff had worked their guts out to deliver that new way of working. They need this feedback to know that it counts. They need to know that the work that they're doing has made a difference to the people that matter to them. At a service level, we can dig down so we can know that our pods have delivered care, and we've captured the views of over 8,000 people over time. We can understand the difference between an elective, the service overall, what it feels like to experience trauma versus an elective experience, and understand that. And at award level, if you're a manager in my organisation, award manager, every 2 weeks you will get a feedback within hours of speaking to patients of your ward about how you're doing against each of those core domains that matter most to patients whilst they're in hospital. Importantly, as well as all of the measurement, we capture everything that's said about your care whilst they're with you. And we share that with you, and we stick it on the walls, regardless of what's said. So there's no policing, it's just publicly shared. We believe that level of transparency helps us get better. So I'm imagining that the domestic Chris, who gets a special mention about the way that he served that coffee that morning, Chris feels noticed in that team. He feels that he's contributing to part of that quality. And he turns up a little bit more motivated tomorrow to provide coffee in just the same way. I had a nervous ward manager come up to me and she said, you know, I really feel I need to share. There's at least 3 members of my team, I think, who are going out of their way to be named in the patient feedback reports. So I said, well, what do you imagine they're doing in the process of being named? I said, they're probably sharing what their name is so that the person can remember it's definitely David. So the patient is probably definitely hearing a lot of information about what that person's called, right? And they're probably providing some pretty fantastic care that they want to be acknowledged. I'd tell the rest of your team to do what those 3 people are doing. So measurement in itself brings out quite peculiar behavior in us as human beings, isn't it? So we really, really worry about measurement before it starts, and we don't really like other people coming in and taking a little look at the work that we do. I had a diabetologist who just about when the program was just setting up wrote to me and told me that I was really going down the wrong path. He was really concerned about the organisation going down this route, and had I truly appreciated how representative and what the data needed to be like in order to robustly use it to make change. And I acknowledged his concerns, but shared that we were probably going to have a go and do it anyway and learn in the process of doing. And in the first tranche of data, he was named as 3rd in the list of the most per-centred docs in our organisation. I got another letter from him celebrating this fantastic development and wondered if there was anything he could do to support this new initiative. So I think we're funny as human beings, and measurement brings that out on us. But the commitment to measure well is an important one, and we've committed to that. So if you're a consultant in my organisation, what patients said about you last year will be compared with what they're saying about you this year. It will be fed into your appraisals. It will be openly shared on a SharePoint in the organisation, and you will get your data alongside all of the other colleagues within your specialty. Measurement for improvement, not for judgment. It's not punitive, but it is open. We have that information, and the more that we share it, the better. It indicates who we need to support, and it allows those teams and individuals to take real pride in the work that they're doing. So across my organisation, you will see posters that reveal all of that data and make it very explicit. Work we did with patient leaders to transform orthopaedic care, reduce mortality by 43%, but also pay attention to the time of day people wanted to be up in the morning, the own clothes that they wanted to wear, the choices they made about how their care was delivered, an important part. And we made mouse mats for that team so that every day they could be reminded about the importance of sustaining those changes that have been made over time. So it's been mentioned more than once today about the power of relationships. And I adore this quote from Atul Gawande, a surgeon. And this notion that human caring and just the effort to do better for people while you embark on an ambitious program can seem hopelessly naive, but it absolutely isn't. We were rated as an outstanding organisation by the CQC, one of a handful of trusts nationally. That pride is owned by staff who have been part of delivering it. We've learned a lot from stories. I feel a need to choose a Newcastle United story this morning to balance David's allegiance to Leeds. But in the process of measuring patient experience, we capture human stories all the time in the free text data. On one of those visits to critical care, we learned about the practice of a relatively junior member of staff. She was band 3. And she was caring for a 27-year-old gentleman who every week would meet his mates, would go and watch Newcastle United play football, sink a few beers and go home again. He was coming to the end of his life. She knew he wasn't going to leave the critical care unit, and she decided it was in her power to do something about that. Without seeking permission, without seeking support from senior leaders, she managed to negotiate the IT nightmare and have the next Newcastle United match streamed to the critical care unit. The gentleman could no longer swallow, so she made Newcastle brown lollies, and then she invited his mates round. Again, stories of compassion that exist, but commitment for leadership, for person-centered care that can exist at every level of your organisation is the stuff that's helped us feel better. And we can't help uncover stories like that and feel we're in the process of moving in the right direction. So we pay attention to celebrating kindness and compassion in my organisation because we think it matters. And in the final slide, I just want to share some reflections of what we've learnt in the last almost 10 years of improvement. The soft stuff isn't soft. It's hard to do well, it's hard to do reliably and consistently, but the impact is massive. It's not a choice between the soft and fluffy stories and the hard and credible data. We've learnt from the power of using both to good effect. Pay attention to the real values and behaviours that exist in your organisation. They might not be in your induction packs. They're more likely to be in the free text comments of what your patients observe about your care. That will reveal the values of the place in which you work. This isn't quick work, it's not easy work, and we've been at it a lot longer than many, perhaps. So prepare for the long haul, but above all, protect that front line and find a way of finding the joy in improvement. Okay, I think I want to stop there.